Types of satellite orbits. By inclination, there are three kinds of satellite orbits: equatorial orbit, inclined orbit, and polar orbit. Equatorial orbit. An equatorial orbit is when the satellite rotates in an orbit directly above the equator, usually in a circular path. It has an inclination of 0 degree. Inclined orbit. Inclined orbits are virtually all orbits except those that travel directly above the equator or directly above the north and south poles. The angle of inclination vary between 0 to 180 degrees. Polar orbit. A polar orbit is when the satellite rotates in a path that takes it over the north and south poles in an orbital pattern that is perpendicular to the equatorial plane. Polar orbiting satellites follow a low-altitude path close to Earth's surface, passing over and very close to both the north and south poles. The angle of inclination of a satellite in a polar orbit is nearly 90 degrees. On the basis of the altitude from Earth, the types of orbits are classified into low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, and geostationary Earth orbit. Low Earth orbit. Low Earth orbit satellites operate at a distance of about 160 to 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. It takes approximately 90 to 120 minutes to circle the Earth. Medium Earth orbit. Medium Earth orbit is the region of space around the Earth above low Earth orbit and below geostationary orbit. The orbital periods of medium Earth orbit satellites range from about 2 to 6 hours. This satellite operates at altitudes between 2,000 kilometers and 35,786 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Geostationary Earth orbit. A geostationary satellite is an Earth-orbiting satellite. It placed at an altitude of approximately 35,786 kilometers directly over the equator, that revolves in the same direction the Earth rotates, that means west to east. This satellite takes 24 hours to orbit the Earth. Orbits are also classified into two types on the basis of the shape: circular orbit and elliptical orbit. Circular orbit. Circular orbit is the orbit with a fixed distance around the barycenter, that is, in the shape of a circle. This orbit has an eccentricity of 0. There are several types of circular orbits, and they include geostationary orbit, polar orbit, and equatorial orbit. Elliptical orbit. An elliptical orbit is the revolving of one object around another in an oval-shaped path called an ellipse. The eccentricity of an elliptical orbit is greater than 0 but less than 1. Sometimes these satellites are closer, and at other times they are farther away from Earth. The closest point a satellite comes to Earth is called its perigee. The farthest point is the apogee. The most common example of elliptical orbit is highly elliptical orbit.